I'm excited to welcome Alicia Aebersold to the Association 100 today. Alicia is with the American Psychological Association. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me, Megan. It's great to be here.
So much has been covered in the news about mental health and the struggles that people are dealing with. How is the APA working with its members to help combat that?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the mental health emergency we're facing in this country and globally has been exacerbated by the pandemic and all of the systemic crises that we're facing every day: climate change, gun violence, racism. Our annual Stress in America survey found that nearly a third of adults say their stress levels are so high they sometimes struggle with even basic decisions, such as what to wear and what to eat. So there's certainly a mental health crisis, but there's also a stress crisis, an anxiety crisis. And our members need our support in helping to attack that crisis. We have 130,000 of those members, and they range from working in academic research, K through 12 schools, the armed forces, business and industry, and of course, in private psychology practice. We have psychologists working at Google, they're members of Congress, they head up associations. And because the field is so diverse as an association, we have to support them in a way that's very diverse. So for our members that directly work with patients, we use continuing education. We have webinars, we have materials that we produce for them that they can then share with patients. We have a lot of members who work in private practice. So maybe they're working with one or two other psychologists and don't have a lot of resources to develop those kinds of resources. So we do that for them. We also have support for our scientists and research members to help them elevate their science and do their jobs differently around issues around mental health. And then for practitioners, we also advocate to support their work. For instance, psychologists are really seeing the benefits of telehealth. And then for our scientist members, we work really hard to elevate the science to the public because the science of psychology has so much to offer for all of those who are struggling right now. We reach the public through our podcast. We have a really popular podcast called Speaking of Psychology, which just hit 10 million downloads this week. And,
Wow.
and then our efforts to get psychologists in the popular press on the issues, which we've increased those hits by 650% in the past 5 years. There's a lot of interest in the public in psychology and how to tackle these issues. So that's kind of in the nutshell what we work on.
I think that's amazing. Because my next question is, how did the pandemic change the way you communicate with your members? And it sounds as if it's changed in many, many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we normally would do is ask our members what they need. That's what all associations do, right? You survey
Right.
your members. But remember how it was at first? Like none of us could predict. No one would, said that first week, this is going to be an ongoing multi-year crisis. So immediately we just decided to rely on what we already knew. Like we didn't think we were going to have time to ask them what they needed. And we all, as people, were feeling panic and anxiety. So how can we help our members immediately? So we pivoted into this kind of support mode. Like how can we best help our members and the public cope with all this uncertainty? A lot of that came from content developed. Like we created and released and reframed hundreds of pieces of content in the first few weeks on topics like stress, anxiety, grief, so much grief. The grief not being able to be with someone who's sick, even before the grief of loss, physical distancing and isolation, especially like with older people at that point, and how to deal with emotions the pandemic brought on, how to be more resilient, the psychology of Zoom fatigue. We were kind of all over it. And then we worked with trying to help basically an emergency transformation of in-person therapies to telehealth, which was a big deal. And then challenges introduced for researchers who found their research activities were curtailed by social distancing. Like, how do you get research subjects in? You can't. The concerns with psychology students and their faculty who now have to learn and teach and study and graduate, even graduate at a distance. And we work to elevate issues around equity, especially pulling together efforts to help frontline healthcare workers.
Right.
So with our members, we did regular town halls. And then I think the biggest thing we did is we changed not just the level of all this content we were producing, but the cadence of delivering it to our membership. We really upped how often we communicated with them, which kind of goes against the normal, stop sending us emails thing. And in delivering that content to our members more often in the midst of that crisis when it first began, we discovered that they read it more, they shared it more. All of our open rates skyrocketed. But most importantly, I think we supported our members, not just in their careers and their work, but as humans. there's researchers are struggling with their research and their kids are home full time. There's clinicians who are trying to help people deal with grief who lost a loved one. There's students struggling with actual anxiety about their classes and how they're going to become psychologists. So I think a lot of those efforts have stayed with us in terms of increased content, and but also I think that idea of remembering that our members themselves were facing these issues just like we were was probably the most important thing.
I love that. Just because the pandemic really did upend everything, and you forget the position that these psychologists are even in, because you just think psychologists are there to help me, but
Yeah.
they need the help themselves. So I love that answer.
Yeah.
So switching topics a little bit,
Yeah.
I read a lot of firsts in your bio. You were the first chief comms officer at APA.
Yeah.
And before that, you were the first senior vice president of communications and strategic development at the National Council of Behavioral Health.
Yeah.
So why is it important for organizations to have these high-level comms roles in place?
Yeah, I love that question so much. I just fully believe that really great communications people don't just produce products. They ask questions that make business decisions better, and questions that maybe open doors that weren't considered before. So that kind of strategic expertise is a value that communications adds. And I think my last few jobs have been first because of CEOs who understand the importance of communications. It's a key strategic function. It has to be as central to management as finance and operations. You have your CFO and your COO, you need your CCO. Seating communications at that table adds real value. And it changes the perception of communications in the association as well, which moves it from an assumed kind of support function to a clear strategic leader. So we ask why, as all good communications people do. What are you trying to achieve? Who do you want to reach? Why do you think you want a press release? What do you want people to do? And I think those questions not only are helpful for the organization, but they can completely change the frame or perspective of whatever business decision that they're making. They make our organization smarter, more impactful, more mission aligned. So I think that the CEOs who understand that communications needs to be at that table are rewarded with really far-thinking strategic insight, like way beyond the issue at hand, and operational expertise, which is a combination that doesn't just elevate the work of the association, but I think actually improves its trajectory. I mean, part of the other reason I've had jobs that are first is because I have chosen not to accept the job as offered unless it's at that table. I've chosen to work with CEOs who understand that elevating communications to the C-suite is a strategic game changer for the association. I think all my career I've worked with brilliant thinkers and doers, and felt privileged to be the one who can take their work and make sure others see it. Like, what's the point of doing all that work if it's not going to have impact? Communications, I believe, is art and science. It's insight and it's tactical nimbleness. And I think if the CEO and CCO aren't in lockstep about the big picture, you miss opportunity. We have to be able to work together and believe in the same philosophy, that the work we're doing is work that is worth elevating, that associations have more impact if people can act on their expertise. I just believe we all get up every day hoping to make a difference, and communications is critical to ensuring that we can.
As a communicator, I absolutely love that answer. So this has been great. Thank you, Alicia. I appreciate you joining, and thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.